Hi, my name's Andy,
Jason.
and this is the Power 2 Pod. This week's episode, we are going to be looking at the non conference schedules, who's doing it right, who's doing it wrong, what should be like the best process of doing it, and then we're going to be looking at the Big Ten and SEC matchups that we have for this season. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, looking at the non-conference scheduling for the Big Ten and SEC, there is a difference between the two conferences, as the Big Ten plays 9 conference games and the SEC plays 8. So that allows the Big Ten to only schedule 3 non-conference games, while the SEC gets to schedule 4. You can tell by the different teams kind of what their strategy is. Some teams will schedule 3 or 4 cupcakes. Others are challenging themselves at least once, or some of them have a couple hard games. So I know we kind of highlighted a couple team schedules for this segment. If you want to get started with Georgia's schedule, Jay, and what they have looking at for non-conference.
Yeah. Um, First off, we start the week. The first game with Clemson. It's in Atlanta. It's a home game for Georgia, but it's not at Stanford Stadium. They played Clemson to start the year, I think 3 years ago. And it was a really good game. And I like that Georgia goes out and gets the non-conference games that will mean something, that it's not just a cakewalk. I know last year they did kind of have a cakewalk on conference schedule. But the year before that, we started with Oregon, and then the year before that, we did Clemson. But then, after that, we got Tennessee Tech, UMass, and then Georgia Tech, which Georgia Tech's in-state rivalry. You're always going to get played tough with that non-conference game. So, really, to me, it's just those 3 games. But I like Georgia scheduling, Clemson and big teams from the ACC or the Big Ten, um, to play out the non-conference.
Yeah, Georgia's not afraid to play anybody. They're not afraid to play big games. I'm not saying the other teams are, but Georgia's not afraid to schedule them because all these games are scheduled 8-10 years from now. So you never know who's going to be good when that time rolls back around. But Georgia's definitely not one to stray away from one of the big matchups. Really stinks for Clemson to start the season against Georgia and that juggernaut over there. Um, if we move on to the next team, you see a very big difference in scheduling. Ohio State, their non-conference schedules Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall. So no test. They get to ramp up into the conference schedule with 3 group of 5 teams, and none of the 3 should pose a real threat to them, which could be nice because they are breaking in a lot of new players with the transfer portal and a couple impact freshmen that could come in, but very different from Georgia's schedule.
Yeah, for sure. And it kind of follows the old, moving on to Ole Miss and the SEC. It is a weak non-conference schedule and a weak schedule altogether. I think Ole Miss has like the number 2 easiest schedule of all college football, and that's why I think they'll definitely make the SEC championship game this year. They play Furman, Middle Tennessee, Wake Forest, and Georgia Southern as their non-conference. And then in conference, they play Georgia at home, and then I think they play LSU away. And that's like their biggest games that they have on the schedule. So Ole Miss is definitely, primed to have one of its best years in a long time.
Yeah. When the thing with the SEC having 4 non-conference games, I think most of the time you see them play at least one Power 4 conference team, and then it's littered with FCS and Group of 5 teams. Which, I mean, if you that's gonna I think that's gonna become the norm now with the Big Ten and SEC. Just because the conferences are only getting harder with the more teams. Now, if you look at USC, they're one of the few Big Ten teams that have a really hard non-conference schedule. They still kept Notre Dame on the schedule, which is the rivalry. They have LSU to open the season in Las Vegas, and they also have Utah State on their schedule. So, in addition to playing 9 Big Ten teams, they're crossing over playing LSU in Las Vegas, and they're getting independent Notre Dame as well. And at the last game of the season, so they're bookend with 2 high quality opponents, and USC's coming in with, a lot of unknowns. But it's definitely, if you, compare Ohio State and USC, 2 completely different scheduling options there.
Yeah, for sure. And with, and that's something I really don't like is the neutral site games. I would much rather see a home and home series than to see, like I said, we went to Clemson like 3 years ago, and to me, we should play Clemson in Georgia and Stanford. And same thing with, USC and LSU. It's like, why are they going to Las Vegas? I mean, I guess it's middle ground for them, but like, just do a home and home series. I feel like it's better for the fans. It's better for the schools and the programs. And like you said, those are big games that could be a huge recruiting thing. Recruiting like accolade to have people come in and watch them play those big games because Ohio State last year they scheduled Notre Dame as a non-conference game, and that was an exciting game. And it's just you get to see those opponents that don't always get to play each other, and that just being really good football. But when I feel like it just kind of loses its kind of prestige when it's a neutral site.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm all in favor of home and homes, and neutral games are for bowl games and playoff games.
Yeah, exactly. Moving forward to Florida, they kind of have an interesting non-conference schedule. They have Miami on the schedule, which not the best. It's not going to be the best game probably, but it's interesting that Florida and Miami are kind of blue blood football programs that have been struggling lately. In the last 5 years, both teams have been underperforming, and so it'll be interesting to see them play. And I feel like that game, when they play, like whoever wins will have huge momentum into their season. And then obviously they have the in-state rival Florida State. So Florida always kind of has a harder non-conference schedule than most because Florida State's been up and coming and they've been good, and it's just a heated rivalry. I mean, I guess it's the same thing with Miami with it being in-state. So I see those 2 non-conference games being really tough for them.
Yeah, and then they also, they pull UCF in the Big 12, and then Stanford from the FCS. So, I mean, if you look at Florida's schedule, and with the daunting SEC schedule, in addition to that, I mean, they have 3 other Power 4 schools they're going against. They only have one FCS team / Group of 5 team, so they're playing a Power 4 team 11 out of 12 games this year. So, I mean, they got to go down as one of the hardest schedules in the country this year. Looking at
And
another
USC,
team, yeah,
UCF has Gus Malzahn as their head coach, who used to coach in the SEC for Auburn. So being able to play Florida down there, he can kind of know what's coming and plan ahead. And he knows how to win SEC games.
yeah, for sure. Moving on to the last Big Ten team schedule here, we have Wisconsin, who's, we talked about home and homes being pretty important and pretty cool. They got a home and home with Alabama, where it's at Wisconsin this year. And then they also have South Dakota and Western Michigan. So they kind of touch all aspects of college scheduling. They got an FCS team, Group of 5 team, and an SEC Power 4 team. So Wisconsin schedules, I think that's kind of the schedule you kind of want to see if you're a Big Ten team, where you're kind of, you're easing in with a Group of 5 team or an FCS team. And then, by that 3rd or 4th week, then you're getting into the meat of the schedule and kind of seeing what you're really made of.
Yeah, and I love it. I love the Southern teams coming up north. Texas has to go to Michigan, I believe, this year, and then Alabama has to go to Wisconsin. I'm excited for that. That's something that college football really hasn't seen, specifically with the SEC. A lot of the good teams like Georgia and Alabama, and even LSU sometimes normally doesn't go more north than Kentucky and doesn't go more west than Texas. And like I said, just the weather. It's always warm, hot, good football weather. So it'll be interesting to see when they have to go up north and, if weather, if it's later in the season. But that's more of the playoffs than non-conference games. But it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see those teams move up north.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking at like the big picture of non-conference scheduling, with the playoffs expanding to 12 teams, it gives you more room for error. So it's going to be interesting to see as, the 12-team playoff makes its, progress and people get used to how it's formatted and all that. Do these teams take more chances with the scheduling, like with Florida or USC, or do they go the Ohio State route where, hey, we're going to guarantee our 3 non-conference wins, and then as long as we stay 1 or 2 losses in conference, we should be fine. So it's really going to be interesting to see how this grows and how teams adapt to the 12-team playoff with their non-conference scheduling. And, hopefully we'll get more of the big-time matchups in between conferences, but I could also see it going the other way where they're like, hey, we're going to play 3 group of 5 teams and worry about our conference schedule.
Yeah, I kind of wish, like, in the future that somehow the football kind of adapts like how basketball does it with like the Big Ten. I think it is a Big Ten ACC or Big
It
East.
used to be. Yeah, it used to be, but now it's like, I think it's ACC, SEC now. But yeah, they used to have the
but
ACC
they
Big
do a
Ten
clash
crossover.
and they all. Yeah. It'd be cool to see that in football, like later on, once, like you said, once you get kind of used to the formats and what you can expect as your playoff seeding and stuff like that for non-conference games. It'd be interesting to see, SEC in the Big Ten or Big Ten in the ACC, SEC in the Big 12. I think it'd just be a cool idea to see come into fruition.
Well, I think with that, you also got to see some uniformity between the schedules. With one big conference playing 9 conference games like the Big Ten, and the SEC only playing 8, I think if the Big Ten came down to 8 conference games, I think you'd see more interconference matchups like that. And I think in converse, if the SEC went to 9 conference games, you'd see less of that hard scheduling because, why have 10 hard games when you already have 9 in conference? So I think a lot of it in the future will depend on if these conferences do end up aligning with the amount of conference games they play. Next, we're going to look at some of the Big Ten and SEC matchups this year. We have 4 of them, and oddly enough, they happen all between weeks 1 through 4, and we have one a week. Week 1 gets kicked off with the matchup we mentioned before, USC versus LSU, and that's going to be happening in Las Vegas. It's going to be our first look at the new defense at USC and the new quarterback at LSU.
Yeah, and you're gonna look at that game, and it might be a shootout. Both offenses, with Lincoln Riley's offense and even Brian Kelly's kind of turned the tide of LSU being more of an offensive weapon school versus defense. Like I said, it might be a shootout, and it'll be an interesting game to watch.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think that one's on a Saturday. I think that's a Sunday game or a Monday game to get started off with the season. So I don't think it's a traditional Saturday game either. Moving on to the next matchup, week 2, we get the Texas at Michigan matchup. Got Texas coming back from both teams coming from, playoff appearances last year. One team's going to look a lot like they did last year with Texas, and Michigan's going to look a lot different with new quarterback and losing a lot of talent to the NFL. Still don't know for sure if Alex Orji is going to be their quarterback or not. But that's going to be a really interesting matchup, with the Longhorns coming all the way up north to the Big House to face Michigan week 2.
Yeah, to me, that's going to be one of the most highlighted games, especially out of this list. For me, like you said, with a lot of staff turnover and roster turnover for Michigan and the national champs. And, Texas lost a lot in the draft as well. So it will be interesting to see kind of how they both come to play so early in the season too. So, I mean, I would definitely give the edge to Michigan being a home team and Texas having to travel up north. But to me, that's a neck and neck type matchup.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big, kind of measuring stick game for Michigan as they're, coming off the national title game with Sharon Moore as the coach. He had a lot of success last year, but now it's his team. His responsibilities. It does change things without having Jim Harbaugh there, kind of as his fallback when he was filling in for the suspensions and whatnot. But yeah, I think week 2, big measuring game there for Michigan. Not just Michigan, but the Big Ten Conference as well, because you're looking at Michigan as being top 4 team in the conference, Texas being a top 4 team in the conference. So I think it's really going to show kind of pecking order between Big Ten and SEC in that matchup.
Yeah. And in week 3, you got Alabama going to Wisconsin. Again, another Southern team going up north. Alabama losing Nick Saban. I feel like this game will be a big either influence towards the DeBoer regime of his takeover for Alabama if he wins. But, Wisconsin hasn't been great in the last couple of years, but, Big Ten defense is different. And, he's seen that at Washington against Michigan. They struggled. That was a high-powered offense. People thought that they were just going to throw the ball all over them, and that did not happen. So I'm not saying Wisconsin's defense is as good as Michigan was last year, but playing Big Ten defense, especially in a Big Ten stadium atmosphere, that's going to be a struggle for Alabama.
Yeah. I mean, I think Alabama obviously will have the, talent discrepancy going in their favor. So, I mean, they're going to be the more talented team, but you're playing on the road, new coach, new system, new scheme, and still early in the year. So, you could, with all the moving parts in the offseason, you could still see a team that's not quite in sync. And if you come up to a Big Ten school like Wisconsin, they're going to jump around in the fourth quarter and you better bring it. And, anything can happen. But it's, another one of those measuring stick games and, kind of see where Alabama's at. Not so much Wisconsin, but see if Alabama under the new coach DeBoer, if they're still top tier or are they taking a step back without Nick Saban?
Yeah. And moving to week 4, UCLA going down to Baton Rouge for Louisiana or LSU. UCLA is gonna have kind of a down year. They lost Chip Kelly to Ohio State, which is now a Big Ten opponent, and LSU at home. It's one atmosphere down there that you don't want to travel to. So unfortunately, I don't think that's gonna be much of a game, but I just don't think it's enough for UCLA to even be competitive in that game.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of those, higher end SEC teams against a team that's going to be in the bottom tier of the Big Ten this year. It's definitely a matchup you don't see very often, West Coast team coming all the way over to SEC country and playing at the SEC team. But yeah, there's so many unknowns with UCLA, with new coach, new quarterback, new everything there, with Chip Kelly kind of leaving them high and dry there. But I think they got the right guy there. He's a UCLA guy. He really does want to build UCLA to being a respectable team. But they might have to take some licks this year, and LSU might be a team that gives it to them there in week 4. But it's nice to see, 4 big-time matchups between the Big Ten and SEC, so we don't have to wait till, first round of the college football playoff to see these two conferences kind of face off, and we'll get kind of a glimpse into the pecking order, and it may even set up for a couple of rematches in the college football playoff this year. All right, now we'll move on to our Penn State minute here. James Franklin over the last couple of weeks is, kind of give his off-season press conference. Got a couple of quotes that I found kind of interesting from Coach. One of them was about the culture of the Penn State program, and he said, "I think up to this point, we've been able to have a ton of stability through culture, through parents and kids really feeling that we were invested in them and their futures in the program and their development on and off the field. And the majority of those kids have stuck with us because of that." And if you really look, I mean, Penn State really hasn't had a ton of transfer portal movement in or out. and they don't have a ton of decommits. Well, once they commit to Penn State, for the most part, they stay with that commitment. I know we had 2 decommits over the last couple weeks, but in the grand scheme of things, I mean, every team's getting that. So I think, James Franklin's really speaking to his culture and what's making Penn State at this moment. And then the other quote that I found interesting was on the college football playoff expansion. Coach Franklin said the other interesting one everyone is talking about is Notre Dame not getting a bye. They do, in my opinion, because they don't have a conference championship game. That's their bye week. The other thing I think both the SEC and the Big Ten are trying to protect is, in the old days, the loser of the conference championship game was out, and now that should not be the case. The winner and the loser from both the SEC and the Big Ten should be in. So just kind of an interesting tidbit, kind of, unprovoked about the Notre Dame and how, Notre Dame fans are complaining that they can't get the first week bye, but hey, you don't play in a conference, so you're getting that week off. So kind of stating the obvious there, but still laying it out there. And then, with the 4-team playoff, it was pretty much impossible to include the championship game loser in the top 4, even if they were a top 4 team. Not too many instances where it would have came up, but sometimes 2 of the 4 best teams just win against each other in the conference championship game. Other than that, Penn State's been kind of hot in the recruiting trail, locking in, I believe, 11 commitments over the last 30 days. So class of 2025 is growing. And with that, I mean, the momentum's riding and, just a few more weeks before the season starts.
So moving on to the Georgia Minute, kind of diving into Kirby Smart's latest interview with Finbaum. Kirby claims that, Georgia is trying to build to sustain, meaning he doesn't want Georgia to be a one-and-done program, and he doesn't want to live and die on the transfer portal to build teams. He believes that Georgia is a good enough atmosphere, a good enough team that, he's trying to teach these young kids that it's okay to sit 1 or 2 years behind somebody and learn, and then, ball out your junior, senior year. And, they have numerous people of that they get 1 year of playing time or a year and a half of playing time, and they're a first round draft pick in the NFL. So he's able to kind of use that as a recruiting tool of his past successes of people sitting behind other players, and then when they get the opportunity to play, they ball out. And then he also had mentioned that he believes in 5 to 10 years from now, we'll probably look back and regret letting players transfer numerous times. He said on numerous occasions, players being able to move to more than one team. I think, I can't think of his name. Somebody, this is like his 3rd season or his 5th season with 3 different teams, and they're just transferring anywhere and everywhere they get playing time. And, he states that, that's really hard on the academics part of it, of being a student athlete. And he thinks that we'll probably look back and kind of wish we did things different now. And then he finished up the interview kind of stating that he's tired of all the complaining and bickering about the NIL and the portal. He's ready, and he's getting his team ready to just go play football. That's all it is about, is playing the game. Everybody loves the game. Just go out and play. And then moving on forward from that, there's talk circling more about Carson Becks being a really high contender for the Heisman this year. And they say if he wins it, it's going to be more of a team award than the actual individual accolade. Carson Becks was statistically one of the best quarterbacks in college football last year, but when you have such a good defense and you have a good offense around you, you know, you don't get to put up 6,000 yards passing because you're a balanced offense and stuff like that. So, it'd be interesting to see. I think Georgia's offense is going to take a step forward this upcoming season, and I wouldn't be surprised if Carson Beck isn't a top 3 candidate this upcoming season. Latest commitments for Georgia. We recently committed Isaiah Gibson. He's a 5-star edge. He's ranked the number 1 edge in the 2025 class, and then 17th overall recruit. And then Georgia is currently ranked 3rd in the 25 recruiting class, behind Ohio State and Alabama.
Yeah, I know Carson Beck is considered for the Heisman, but right now he's linked to one of the Cavender twins, so not sure which one, but he better get focused real soon.
Could be both.
Could be. That'll do it for us here at the Power 2 Pod. Thanks for watching. Like, review, subscribe, and we'll see you guys around.
Thank you. See you.